haven't really talked since the initiative passed, at least not in person. The weather's changed a bit, and so has your progress. I mean, this has exploded for you. What's happening in your world?
We've been hard at work the last almost 3 months now, speaking with city officials and building community organizational support here in Denver to implement and educate Denver residents.
And you're going national.
We're going national to the extent that we're very open to conversations with other individuals and organizations that are interested in pursuing psychedelic drug policy reform. We're very focused in Denver because we have a lot of work to do. And it's important for us, we feel like it's our civic duty to ensure that city leaders and the proponents of Initiative 301, that we're all on the same page, and that also Denver residents have an opportunity to learn more about psilocybin, especially when it comes to safety and responsible use.
I noticed that you were doing something new because Decriminalize Denver, your Facebook page, changed to SPORE.
It did.
What's happening? What is SPORE?
Yeah, SPORE. SPORE is the Society for Psychedelic Outreach, Reform, and Education. We're a Colorado-based nonprofit. We'll be applying for our 501c3 status here in a few weeks. And our mission is to transform public opinion to normalize and decriminalize the responsible use, possession, and cultivation of psilocybin mushrooms and also other psychedelic plants and fungi. And so we offer resources like education, community and organizational support, policy guidance, and we're also advocates for individuals, communities, and organizations that are interested in pursuing or exploring psychedelic drug policy reform, both here in Colorado and nationwide.
I noticed that within SPORE, it's not psilocybin, it's psychedelics.
Correct.
Which really didn't have anything to do with the psilocybin initiative in Denver. Mm-hmm. How does that change what you're doing, or does it?
It changes it only to the extent that we're talking about other substances. Psilocybin, of course, has an excellent clinical track record in terms of its medical potential. Other psychedelic compounds such as iboga, for example, has a demonstrated impact on things like addiction to opioids. We're also seeing that, for example, ketamine can be an amazing treatment for depression. And so, in terms of our organization, having messaging and support around these substances and how they can be impactful is a priority of ours, and also providing resources to these organizations in terms of how to talk to people, how to talk to the public, how to talk to lawmakers and policymakers about psychedelics is also pretty important.
So explain to me what a nonprofit status allows you to do. How does it change the game?
Yeah, so being awarded a 501c3 nonprofit status for SPORE would allow us to really get the word out to particularly Denver residents, and most importantly, also an opportunity for individuals to contribute to the organization in a way that's tax exempt. And so getting that designation is important because as we're fundraising, as we're speaking to individuals and organizations across the country, having that nonprofit status shows that we're very community focused and that our intention right now is specifically education.
Who do you want to talk to? I mean, you talk about community engagement and speaking to people about what this is and why it can be effective and what evidence there is out there to support it. But to create change, you have to talk to powerful people.
Sure.
So what powerful people do you hope to get in front of?
Well, I mean, right now we've had a very promising conversation with members of Denver's District Attorney's Office, the City Attorney's Office, and the police here. And we're very optimistic because right now it seems that these various city officials want to honor and respect the will of the voters. And they also are very interested in working with us and collaborating with us on things like public service announcements that emphasize safety and responsible use here in Denver, but also providing training and resources to police and law enforcement on things like harm reduction and crisis management when it comes to drug offenders. And nationally, I mean, there are a ton of people talking about psilocybin right now. It even goes so far as there's what I like to call a psychedelic caucus of congressmen and women who recently supported a bill sponsored by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to loosen the restrictions on psychedelic research, and in particular research related to psilocybin. And so it's a national conversation, and we're also talking to people globally in various countries across the world. And while it's very tempting to want to really dive in and get involved on a national or even a global scale, it's very important for us to make sure that we're laser focused here in Denver, because if we want this movement to succeed overall, it's important that we're working with city officials and that we're especially getting in touch with residents here in Denver. I feel like I have a civic duty to really contact those that said no on 301, and also those that didn't vote in this election. There are a lot of people that have questions about psilocybin, and so the more that we can provide those resources and create opportunities for engagement is going to be very important.
It passed so narrowly, and to that point, roughly half of the people who voted didn't want this to happen. How are you talking to those people right now?
Yeah, it really goes back to our original campaign messaging. When we were out there collecting signatures and talking to people about psilocybin and its potential, sharing both the clinical research and some of these kind of first-person anecdotal reports, as soon as we mention how psilocybin, for example, has affected me personally with my own depression, individuals who suffer from cluster headaches and alcoholism, it's helped them. And a lot of that is bolstered by this amazing clinical research that's being conducted by universities like Johns Hopkins and organizations like the Hefter Research Institute. And so once we, in my opinion, a lot of the opposition stems from a lack of information or misinformation, or just no interest in really discovering what psilocybin is or what other psychedelic substances are and how they can be beneficial. And so once we start sharing that information and mentioning all the amazing research and really mobilizing this constituency that now exists, we can start to push the needle there.
So if Denver is the proof of concept, what's next? Where will this apply and work in the future?
Well, I think that when we're successful implementing Initiative 301 in Denver, which I think we will be, I'm excited to talk to Mayor Hancock's office and see what his staff think as well. In many ways, what we're learning, what psilocybin decriminalization has done is actually open a doorway to a direct conversation with city officials when it comes to behavioral health. And so broadening the conversation and looking at the national mental health and addiction crisis that we're facing right now. Denver is a microcosm of that, an example of the entire country. If we can create education and services and programs that prioritize compassion for individuals who use drugs over criminalizing them, we can go a long way towards creating opportunities that benefit our society overall.
Have you been in contact with other cities in Colorado about decriminalizing?
Not yet. We are exploring other cities along the Front Range.
So there are cities that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
I guess you're looking at maybe political makeup or what is it that you're focused on?
Well, so it really comes down to demographics and polling.
Yeah.
And to give a lot of recognition to the team in Oakland, going directly to their city council and establishing relationships with those individuals, that might be our best approach. It's cost effective. It goes right to the point and it directly engages city leaders who can then make a decision and implement a resolution to decriminalize mushrooms. There are parts of the state that, cities that may be more conservative, where we'll definitely want to get some polling done and then discover if a campaign is viable.
That's interesting, though. You want to go to city council itself to see if there are leaders who could support something like
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah.
More broadly, with SPORE, you need money for what?
We need money for our outreach operations, which includes marketing and messaging materials itself. We also are looking at funds to support other events and programs that we want to offer to the city. Working in collaboration with Denver, for example, there may be some funds available on the city's side for things like public service announcements. And I think overall also we'll want to bring some funding to the table to really push that along. And so we're in this very very beginning stage right now with the organization, and exploring, what's possible and how we can make an impact with these funds.
And who's a part of it? I mean, there's a group of people who must be a part of pushing this forward.
Yeah.
You, number one.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Who else?
Yeah, a gentleman named Matthew Duffy. He's actually based in Boulder. And he was integral to our campaign because he was largely responsible for a lot of our Facebook advertising and that specific messaging that's front-facing to the public on social media. And he also had an incredible impact on actually linking our grassroots, boots-on-the-ground team with a lot of the national psychedelic clinicians and researchers, and linking these two groups together so that we can have shared messaging and come to like an understanding of what's possible here. Creating good relationships, that's what he does. And then another individual, her name is Dr. Danielle Wise. She's a PhD with 20 years of therapy practice, working in integration, just like life integration overall. And she was also an educator, so she's our director of education.
What's the end game for you? Best case scenario for Kevin Matthews and what was Decriminalize Denver, now SPORE. Sure. What is the end game? What do you want?
Yeah, psilocybin mushrooms are decriminalized nationally no later than 2026. And then we're looking at what's possible in addition to decriminalization. There is a regulatory landscape that's evolving out of this conversation. And so I think that as long as individuals are no longer being imprisoned for using mushrooms and other psychedelics, and there are community resources available to individuals who want to explore using those substances in a safe and responsible way, then we can start looking at additional models that encourage commerce. I'm not sure if you saw an article that came out, I think yesterday. There's a Denver-based coffee roaster who's looking at including a very small amount of psilocybin as a microdose inside of his coffee, where customers can come in and have a coffee and get those small benefits from using mushrooms without necessarily having like a psychoactive experience. Yeah. So there's a lot of opportunity that's available now.
2026?
2026 or sooner. People tell me we don't have that long.
Why wouldn't you have that long?
Well,
because the conversation won't last that long?
Oh man, 50% of Denver's inmates have behavioral health issues. We're not providing the services they need. We have this national addiction and mental health crisis. In many ways, a lot of the current psychiatric and psychotherapeutic interventions are not working, and so we need new models, we need new conversations about how we can provide opportunities that give individuals the ability to actually heal from what they're suffering from. And then, from there, there's a lot that's possible. Yeah.
This narrowly passed in Denver,
that's right,
in a city that generally is pretty liberal. When you look nationwide, changing federal regulations or decriminalizing nationally, I think a lot of people would call that a pipe dream.
A lot of people called our campaign a pipe dream. I'm the kind of guy that, when I believe something is possible, and when we can create this amazing community to support dramatic, positive change, anything can happen. In Denver, there were 90,000 and change people who voted for decriminalizing mushrooms. If we look at past data, there are at least 10 million, if I'm correct, 30 million Americans that have used psilocybin and other psychedelics in their lifetime. There's a constituency of people that exist for this movement, and the implications for those individuals coming together under a common cause can have dramatic, society-changing, transformational impact here.
And my last kind of thought is, the pushback that you're going to get because you received it on a micro scale here. How do you respond to the people who are yelling and screaming that they don't want this?
I encourage them to come to the table. If they're yelling and screaming, reach out directly to our organization. Call this psychedelic caucus, call the representatives, start talking about it. Most of all, we want individuals, it's always a gift to have the oppositional argument because it gives our organization an opportunity to directly address it. And so being in conversation rather than just simply complaining about it, I think is a better step.
I forgot to get to Denver, so let's just talk specifically about what's been going on, because people talked about it when it passed, and maybe for a couple of days it was in voters' heads, and then a whole lot of stuff happened. What's been happening since then locally in Denver?
Locally in Denver, as far as I know, we've had 0 arrests for psilocybin possession in Denver in the nearly 3 months since 301 passed. Our organization, in collaboration with other state nonprofits, have been talking directly to city representatives. We've had 2 meetings with the DA's office. Representatives from City Council and the Denver Police Department were also present. And we've also had a meeting with the Denver's Director of Public Safety, Troy Riggs, to just really explore what's possible to implement this initiative fairly, and also to accelerate the formation of the psilocybin mushroom policy review panel. And so we're looking forward to our next meeting with Mayor Hancock, where we can discuss the specifics of this panel and recommend individuals to sit on that panel, and also provide his team with some education about psilocybin. And then from there, a lot of our individuals and team members have been out in the community. We've been engaging with regional neighborhood organizations and giving the psilocybin 101 presentation, so that we're informing and educating individuals and creating more opportunities for dialogue. So it's been a little quiet. We've been in the background the last 3 months or so, and now we're looking forward to the opportunity to get much more involved with the city and start creating these programs and services that can educate people.
When you show up to the table with these leaders, what are their concerns? What are you having to talk them through?
Yeah, so a lot of the concerns are about what it looks like for an individual who's under the influence of mushrooms, for example, and more specifically, how is law enforcement supposed to respond to those individuals? Should they assume that they're a public health and safety risk, either to themselves or to others, and arrest them and put them in jail? Or should they simply use the opportunity to have some harm reduction techniques where they're helping out the individual and just letting them know that they're in a safe place and they have support if they need it? So on part of the city, they're very interested in what this specific first responder training looks like. Right now, one of the programs in Denver that's just getting off the ground is a diversion program, where, say for example, a peace officer encounters somebody, let's say on the 16th Street Mall, for whatever reason they're under the influence of mushrooms and they're having a challenging time with the experience. We'd like to create an environment where when that individual sees a police officer, they can approach that person because they know that they're in a safe place. I'd love to live in a world where our first responders where our first responders are not a threat to individuals who are under the influence, really, of any substances. And so it's looking like as this conversation evolves, it's much more about behavioral health and specifically reducing harm on both sides, both to first responders and to individuals who are under the influence, right? And so the more that we can educate educate the city, work with city agencies and organizations and the government to provide these services, the more beneficial impact we'll have for our communities here.
Mike, do you have anything for him that you feel like I'm missing? No. Is there anything you feel like I'm missing?
That's great.
Did we get it all?
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks as always. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Right.
Yeah.